When I think of the most criminally underrated things of all time, my mind automatically goes to the incredible David Winning directed Hallmark Christmas movie, It's Time to Come Home for Christmas. After that, I always think about one specific chord. Alright, so we're talking about what I think is the most underrated chord that I never seen. In fact, I've never actually seen this chord before, but spoiler alert, I'm not going to be one of those channels that's like, wait till the end to find out the chord. The chord is going to be F sharp major 7 over G. Alright, but I want to talk about why I think this is the most underrated chord that I never see it anywhere, specifically anywhere outside of like jazz songs. And why it's important, why you can use it right now, and what it's good for. Alright? So if we're sticking to the chords in the key of C, right? There's a tried and true C major chord. This is going to be our home chord, rocking it out on the Taylor 816 today, by the way. How are we going to build a chord progression to maybe end up here? We're going to end up going home, all right? So traditionally, you'd be like, all right, let's just take a C chord to an A minor chord, right? Then we'll go super basic at first, G, then back to C. Right, that has a sound. We're getting resolution by going home, by going from C major, A minor, G, C. That's super basic. I don't like it. The only way to be more basic than that is make it C, A minor, G7 to C. Don't do that. Don't do the G7 to C. Have a little class, at least. You don't have to do a fancy chord. But if you're building something and you want it to sound interesting before bringing it home, maybe you'd go to the 4 chord in that key. Key of C, right? C, D, E, F, F major. So C, A minor. That has a cool sound to it, right? F to C. Sounds better. If you want to be even classier than that, if you want to be David Winning classy, F major 7 to C. All right, so really you can just do that same thing, but instead of F major bar chord, F major 7, where you have that open E string on top, it kind of asks a question, and then you resolve it, right? And that's kind of the difference of just like thinking about how you want to build chord progressions without, thinking of the melody first. If you just want to be playing around, something to practice to that doesn't sound basic. The thing about that G7, especially this voicing, it so predictably needs to go home, whereas the F major 7, there's a question, do you want to go home or not? Sure, it is time to go home. Why not? The best of both worlds is what I consider the most underrated chord in this key, and that's going to be having an F major 7 over a G bass note, okay? Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but let's talk about how to make it. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take that regular C major chord that you started with, and we're going to thicken it up a little bit. One thing that I've noticed myself doing a lot more as I got better at guitar and became a professional guitar player and played hundreds of shows is I'll play a C major chord as a C/G chord more often than not. I remember when I first started out, I avoided this chord right here. I would always play root position C chord, where my ring finger is on the C, my middle finger is on the 2nd fret of the D string, open G, pointer finger 1st fret of the B string, right? Because you want to get that root note and then the chord. But then, as I started playing more, I would almost always play this shape, where now my pinky is on the C on the A string, my ring finger is on the G on the low E string. So I have a G bass note followed by that C major chord. A couple different reasons you might want to do this. The first reason is it's just an option that you can go to that you do not have to use. There's no difference in playing this chord voicing and this chord voicing if you only strum the bottom 5 strings anyway, right? So I can get all 6 strings if I want. And then maybe I can go into different chord voicings that also use all 6 strings. Right? And then I have to work less to keep the volume steady, right? One of my biggest pet peeves is this D major chord where you just play like maybe the highest 3 strings. Because again, you're inserting a 4 or 3 string chord voicing with a 6 string chord voicing, you might lose volume, so on and so forth. But Anyways, back to the most underrated chord of all time. I use this C/G chord a lot, just because it has a thicker sound. I think it kind of plays better with an open G chord and maybe like an F major 7 chord like this too. I just think it sounds better, and again, you have the option to only play the 5 bottom strings, right? Now, what I like about going from G back home is you kind of get that stabilizing factor of having a G in the bass note of your G chord, but then also having a G in the bass note of your C chord. So it kind of really just coalesces. It all just comes together, and I think it sounds pretty good. It's kind of a cool way to, I don't know, you can call it voice, you can call it whatever you want. But I think it's just a good move to kind of get in the habit of doing, because being in this position right here, where, you know, when I'm thinking of a position chord-wise, my ring finger is kind of responsible for the 3rd fret, middle finger 2nd fret, first fret for the pointer finger. And you can play like a lot of chords in this position, right? So you get the basic goodness of that low G, but you still get that kind of question of an F major 7, right? That resolves really nicely to C. Now, one of the reasons we don't see this is it really, I think this sounds kind of like how a chord might sound on a piano, right? And the reason that you don't see a lot of chords like this, like an F major 7 over G, if we just take all the notes that we have an F, an A, a C, an E, and a G. We have 5 notes in this chord. That's a pretty busy chord on a guitar, right? On a piano, it makes more sense because you could play a G way down on the left side and F major 7 way up top. There's a lot of separation there that I think is harder to get on a guitar because usually, you know, you only have so many options for what you're doing. But because we're skipping the A string, we kind of still establish that G bass note and then still get the cool part of that F major 7 to go home to C. And again, this is just, you know, a very siloed example. Again, one of my songs uses this where I kind of end up going from, you know, if I'm playing, I might go E minor, F sharp, and kind of having these other chords really lead it up into it. I think it's perfect for maybe like chromatic walks where you're just changing bass notes into doing something. But again, I think it's really slept on chord because, like I said, you get really cool thing in the bass, but you still get the question that major 7 on the 4 chord, F, C, D, E, F. F major is the 4 chord in the key of C. So you get a cool little spicy thing that you can always resolve home without really it being too difficult, right? See, I've got my ring finger holding down the G on the 3rd fret of the E string, and then again my pinky is 3D, middle finger 2G, pointer finger 1B, and then open on the high E string. I'm actually with my ring finger muting the A string so I don't even have to hear it, but I think it sounds good to separate the bass note from the chord anyways, maybe by striking with your pick or your fingers, like that. And again, it sounds really kind of cool on its own. And then it's super easy to get back home to C. In fact, I didn't even have to move my pointer finger or my ring finger. All I had to do was, if you look at my pinky and my middle finger, there they are on the 3rd fret of the D string and G string, 2nd fret of the G string, and then I just scoot them up, and that brings me from the F to the C, right? So, again, you're kind of moving your inside fingers is the way I would look at it, to kind of get there. But it's really not too hard, especially if you think of coming from the world of C/G, which more of you should probably think about visiting that world anyway. And a real close cousin, sibling, whatever, for this chord is going to be this one right here. Okay, what's the name of this? I don't even know what the name of this chord is, but what I've got here is I have a G, a C, and an F, right? 3rd fret, E, A, D, open G, 1st fret, 1 on the B string was C, and then an open E. Now this is the sound to me of a C suspended chord, right? but it isn't technically because it has an E in it. But I think this is a really cool chord that we can use with just notes in the key of C that I never, ever, ever see guitar players use. You go to C, G, Alright, so again, it's kind of the same idea, but I do like that F major 7 over G. So again, just kind of like a somewhat quick lesson on maybe just combining different parts of chords and scales that you like. You can use this in other keys for sure. I do think that it's much easier in other keys if you take away the major 7 part of it, where instead of having F major 7 over G, you might actually, some people might actually have an easier time playing this with their thumb in the bass. But if you take away the high E string, then it just becomes an F over a G, or the 4 chord in a key over its 5th, right? So let's say we're in D. What's the 4 chord in the key of D? D, E, F sharp, G. We could play a G triad right here, but then have its 5th. Same thing with the open A. So again, this is just like a different chord voicing that you can use all over the place. And maybe it's the sound that you're looking for, especially as a way to get back home, but still have a little bit of spice on it, right? So again, that's all I got for you today. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something. If you have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comment section, Instagram, Twitter, the website. Check out the Patreon if you want to go through just kind of like some more simple to intermediate advanced music theory with a bunch of guided lessons and stuff. And like I said, if you have any questions, hit me up. Thanks a lot.